My name is Michael, and for the last 8 years I believed I was living the American dream. I was happily married to Jessica, a woman I thought was my soulmate. We lived in a cozy suburban house, the kind with a white picket fence, and we had no children, which gave us the freedom to focus on our careers and enjoy spontaneous adventures. I worked as an architect designing buildings that I hoped would leave a lasting legacy, while Jessica was a talented graphic designer with a passion for digital art. We met in college, during an art history class that neither of us particularly enjoyed, but it was a required course. Jessica sat next to me, her vibrant red hair and infectious laugh instantly catching my attention. We bonded over our mutual disdain for the class and quickly became inseparable. Our love story was the kind that friends envied and strangers admired. We had a connection that felt unbreakable, a bond that seemed destined to last forever. Our life together was filled with joy and laughter. We traveled whenever we could, exploring new cities and immersing ourselves in different cultures. Jessica's spontaneous nature balanced my more structured approach to life, and together we created a beautiful harmony. Our weekends were spent hiking, cooking elaborate meals, and hosting game nights with friends. We had a tight-knit group of friends who often remarked on how perfect we were for each other. Professionally, we supported each other's ambitions. Jessica's career in graphic design took off, and she began working with high-profile clients, creating stunning visual content that gained her recognition in the industry. I was proud of her achievements and encouraged her every step of the way. In return, she was my biggest cheerleader, always excited about my latest architectural projects and the impact they would have. Our love for art and creativity extended into our home. Our house was a reflection of our personalities, filled with Jessica's artwork and my architectural models. We had a small studio where we would often work side by side, lost in our respective creative worlds but always within reach of each other. It was in these quiet moments that I felt the depth of our connection the most. Despite our busy schedules, we always made time for each other. Date nights were sacred, and we took turns planning elaborate surprises. Jessica loved to experiment with new cuisines, and our kitchen became a playground for her culinary experiments. We'd spend hours cooking together, sipping wine, and dancing to our favorite songs. It was during these moments that I felt the happiest, surrounded by the warmth of our love and the life we had built together. Family was important to us, though we had chosen not to have children. Our parents were supportive of our decision, understanding that our careers and personal aspirations took precedence. Jessica's parents, in particular, adored me and often treated me like their own son. We spent holidays with them, creating cherished memories that I thought would last a lifetime. Looking back, those years were the best of my life. I was deeply in love with Jessica and believed with all my heart that she felt the same way. Little did I know that the foundation of trust and love we had built was about to be shattered in the most unimaginable way. Our marriage was a beautiful dance of mutual respect, shared dreams, and a deep love that seemed to grow stronger with each passing year. Jessica and I were each other's best friends and confidants. We shared everything, from the smallest triumphs to the biggest challenges. Our communication was open, and we prided ourselves on our honesty with one another. Jessica had always been my rock, the person I turned to when life became overwhelming. Her smile could light up the darkest of days, and her laughter was a constant source of joy in my life. She had a way of seeing the beauty in the world, even in the most mundane things. It was one of the many reasons I fell in love with her. We had a routine that brought comfort and stability to our lives. Mornings started with a cup of coffee on the porch, discussing our plans for the day. Evenings were reserved for unwinding together, whether it was watching our favorite TV shows, working on our respective projects, or simply talking about anything and everything. Jessica loved to read, and we often found ourselves lost in discussions about the latest book she was reading. Our weekends were our time to reconnect and recharge. We both enjoyed outdoor activities, and hiking became a regular part of our lives. We explored numerous trails, each adventure bringing us closer together. The serenity of nature provided the perfect backdrop for our deep conversations and silent moments of contentment. We also loved to host friends for dinners and game nights, our home often filled with laughter and camaraderie. Despite our decision not to have children, we were deeply involved in the lives of our nieces and nephews. We enjoyed spending time with them, taking them on little adventures, and being the cool aunt and uncle. Jessica had a special bond with them, her nurturing side shining through in the way she interacted with them. I often found myself imagining what kind of mother she would have been, but I respected her choice and was content with the life we had. Professionally, we continued to thrive. Jessica's graphic design business flourished, and she took on exciting projects that allowed her to express her creativity in new ways. She started collaborating with other artists, and their combined efforts resulted in some truly remarkable work. I was always in awe of her talent and the passion she poured into her craft. Her success was a source of pride for me, and I supported her in every way I could. My own career in architecture was equally fulfilling. I had the opportunity to work on several high-profile projects that challenged me and allowed me to grow as a professional. Jessica was always there to provide feedback and encouragement, her keen eye for design complementing my architectural skills. We often joked that if we ever decided to start a business together, we would be unstoppable. Our life together seemed perfect. We had built a strong foundation of love, trust, and mutual respect. Our shared interests and deep connection made every day feel like a new adventure. I couldn't imagine my life without Jessica, and I believed with all my heart that she felt the same way. We were partners in every sense of the word, and I was grateful for the life we had built together. But beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life, cracks were beginning to form. Changes in Jessica's behavior, subtle at first, started to become more pronounced. The woman I thought I knew so well was starting to feel like a stranger, and I couldn't understand why. Little did I know that these changes were the first hints of an infidelity that would shatter our lives and force me to confront a betrayal I never saw coming. The first sign that something was wrong came subtly, almost imperceptibly. Jessica started spending more time out of the house. She had always been busy with work and her art projects, but now there were more late nights, more excuses about client meetings and networking events. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was dedicated to her career, and I admired her ambition. But as the weeks turned into months, her absences became more frequent, and her explanations less convincing. One Friday evening, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Jessica with a nice dinner. I found the house empty, which wasn't unusual, but what struck me was the disarray. Jessica was meticulous about keeping our home tidy, but that day her studio was a mess. Paints were left open, brushes were scattered, and unfinished sketches were strewn across her desk. It looked like she had left in a hurry. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, and an hour later she replied, saying she was at a client meeting that had run late. Something about her message felt off, but I brushed it aside, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us grew. Jessica became more secretive, often stepping outside to take phone calls and quickly closing her laptop when I entered the room. She had always been open about her work, sharing her latest projects and ideas with me, but now there was a palpable wall between us. I asked her about it once and she shrugged it off, blaming stress and tight deadlines. One night, we were hosting a small dinner party with some close friends. Jessica seemed distracted, her laughter forced, and her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. Our friend Sarah, who had known Jessica for years, pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. "She seems different," Sarah said, concern etched on her face. "Is she all right?" I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that Jessica was just going through a phase, but deep down I knew something was wrong. "She's just been really busy with work," I replied, trying to sound convincing. But Sarah's words lingered in my mind, adding to the growing sense of unease. Then came the night that solidified my suspicions. I had been working late on a project and decided to take a break. As I walked past Jessica's studio, I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was hushed, and she sounded nervous. I paused outside the door, listening. "I miss you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped. Who was she talking to? Why was she being so secretive? I wanted to burst into the room, confront her, demand to know what was going on. But I couldn't move. I stood there, paralyzed by the realization that my worst fears might be true. Later that night, after Jessica had gone to bed, I checked her phone. I felt guilty invading her privacy, but I needed to know the truth. I found messages from a contact saved as R. The texts were flirty, intimate, and spoke of meetings that were definitely not work-related. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, each one confirming my suspicions. The next day, I confronted her. "Who is R?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jessica looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment she was silent, and then she sighed. "R is Rebecca," she said, her voice barely audible. "She's a friend from work." "A friend?" I repeated, feeling a surge of anger. "You've been hiding things from me, Jessica, taking secret phone calls, lying about where you've been. What's going on?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked away. "It's not what you think," she said softly. I didn't know how to tell you. Rebecca and we've gotten close, really close. I think I might be in love with her." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the room spin, my world collapsing around me. "In love with her?" I echoed, barely able to comprehend what she was saying. "Jessica, you're my wife. How could you do this?" She started to cry, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry, Michael. I never meant for this to happen. I've been so confused, so lost. Rebecca, she made me feel things I've never felt before." I stood there, numb, unable to process the betrayal. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was telling me she was in love with someone else, and not just anyone, but a woman. It felt like a cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 6 months, she replied, her voice breaking. "It started as a friendship, but it grew into something more. I didn't know how to stop it." I couldn't look at her. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. "I need some time," I said finally, turning away. "I need to think." I left the house, driving aimlessly for hours, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My perfect life had been shattered by a betrayal I never saw coming. Jessica had been my everything, and now I didn't know what to do or how to move forward. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The days following Jessica's confession were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like I was living in a fog, my mind struggling to process the reality of her betrayal. I avoided going home as much as possible, spending long hours at work and crashing on friends' couches. I didn't know how to face Jessica, or even what to say to her. Every time I thought about her with Rebecca, it felt like a knife twisting in my heart. Eventually, though, I had to return home. I couldn't avoid the situation forever, and I needed answers. When I walked into the house, Jessica was sitting on the couch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she seemed to shrink into herself when she saw me. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "I need you to tell me everything," I said, my voice flat. "No more lies, no more half-truths. I need to know what's been going on." She took a deep breath, wiping away fresh tears. "It started about 6 months ago," she began. "Rebecca and I became friends at work. We started spending more time together, going out for drinks, talking about our lives. She was going through a tough time in her marriage, and I tried to be there for her. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I started to feel things for her that I'd never felt before." She paused, looking down at her hands. I didn't know what to do. I was confused, scared. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't ignore what I was feeling. Rebecca and I started seeing each other outside of work, and things just escalated. Escalated how? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We kissed, she admitted, her voice breaking. And then it went further. We started sleeping together. It wasn't just physical, though. I developed real feelings for her. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. The room seemed to spin around me as I tried to process her words. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice filled with pain. Why didn't you come to me when you started having these feelings? I was scared, she said, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to lose you. I thought maybe it was just a phase, something that would pass, but it didn't. And by the time I realized how deep my feelings for Rebecca were, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, incredulous. Jessica, you were having an affair. You've been lying to me for months. How could you not realize that would hurt me? I know, she sobbed. I know I messed up. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you. Her apologies felt hollow, empty. I wanted to believe her, to find some way to make sense of what she had done, but the pain was too raw. Do you love her? I asked, my voice shaking. She looked at me, her eyes filled with anguish. I don't know, she whispered. I thought I did, but now I'm not sure. Everything is so messed up. I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. I need some time to think, I said, my voice trembling. I can't deal with this right now. I walked out of the house, feeling like I was suffocating. I drove aimlessly, trying to clear my mind, but all I could think about was Jessica and Rebecca. The woman I loved had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. In the weeks that followed, Jessica and I barely spoke. I moved into the guest room, unable to sleep in the bed we had shared. I couldn't look at her without feeling a wave of anger and betrayal. She tried to talk to me, to explain herself, but I couldn't listen. Every word she said felt like another twist of the knife. One day, I came home to find Rebecca sitting in our living room. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at her, unable to believe she had the audacity to come to my home. What are you doing here? I demanded, my voice filled with anger. Michael, please, Rebecca said, standing up. I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I snapped. You've already done enough damage. Please, she repeated, her eyes pleading. Just hear me out. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my anger in check. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. Say what you need to say. Rebecca took a deep breath, glancing at Jessica, who was standing silently by the door. I'm so sorry for everything, she began. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. Jessica and we got caught up in something that spiraled out of control, but it's over now. We ended things. Her words did little to soothe my anger. That doesn't change what you did, I said coldly. You betrayed me, both of you. I know, Rebecca said, tears welling up in her eyes, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But you deserve to know the truth. Jessica and we thought we were in love, but we were wrong. We were confused, lost. We hurt you, and I'm so sorry for that. I turned to Jessica, my heart breaking all over again. Is that true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Did you end things with her? Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, it's true. I ended things with Rebecca. I realized that what I felt for her wasn't real. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I want to try to fix things between us, Michael. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you to give me a chance. I didn't know what to say. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh, but a part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could find a way to move past this. I need time, I said finally, my voice shaking. I need time to think about everything. Rebecca left, and Jessica and I were left alone, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but I knew that I needed to try, for my own sake. The road ahead was uncertain, and the wounds were deep, but I hoped that someday we could find a way to heal. The days turned into weeks, and though Rebecca was no longer a part of our lives, the pain of Jessica's betrayal lingered. We existed in a state of limbo, caught between the remnants of our past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Jessica tried to reach out, to bridge the chasm between us, but I kept my distance, unsure if I could ever trust her again. One evening, I decided to confront Jessica about the full extent of her relationship with Rebecca. We needed to lay everything bare if there was to be any hope of moving forward. I found her in her studio, surrounded by her art supplies, lost in her thoughts. "Jessica, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Okay," she said quietly, putting down her paintbrush. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation. "I need you to tell me everything," I began. "No more secrets, no more half-truths. I need to know exactly what happened between you and Rebecca." Jessica nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything." She began to recount the details of her affair with Rebecca. It had started innocently enough, with coffee meetings and late-night chats. They had bonded over their shared love of art and their frustrations with their respective relationships. But as their connection deepened, their interactions became more intimate. "We kissed for the first time after a work event," Jessica confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was late, and we were both a little tipsy. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were in each other's arms. I felt guilty immediately, but I couldn't deny the feelings I had for her." "And you never thought to talk to me about it?" I asked, my anger barely contained. "You never thought to tell me that you were developing feelings for someone else?" "I was scared," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could handle it, that it would go away. But it didn't. It only got stronger." As she continued, she revealed the extent of their physical relationship. They had slept together numerous times, in various places: Rebecca's apartment, hotels, even our own home when I was away on business trips. Each revelation felt like a dagger to my heart, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. "When did you realize it had to end?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "The night you confronted me," she said, her voice breaking. "I saw the pain in your eyes, and I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep hurting you. I ended things with Rebecca the next day." The room was silent as I absorbed her words. The weight of her betrayal was overwhelming, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but I needed to try to understand why it had happened. "Why, Jessica?" I asked, my voice filled with anguish. "Why did you do it?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with remorse. "I don't know," she said softly. "I was lost, confused. I felt like something was missing, and I thought I found it with Rebecca. But I was wrong. I know that now. I love you, Michael. I always have, and I'm so sorry for everything I've done." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move past this. But the road to forgiveness would be long and difficult, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to walk it. "I need time," I said finally, my voice shaking. "I need time to process everything." Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she said softly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, hoping that one day you can forgive me." I left the studio, my heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. The future was uncertain, and I didn't know if we could ever rebuild what we had lost. But I knew that I needed to try, for both our sakes. The path to healing would be long and painful, but it was a journey we had to undertake if there was to be any hope of moving forward. As the weeks went by, Jessica and I began to take small steps towards reconciliation. We started seeing a marriage counselor, hoping that with professional guidance we could navigate the complexities of our relationship. The sessions were painful and emotionally draining, but they also provided a space for us to communicate openly and honestly about our feelings. Jessica was remorseful and committed to making amends. She cut off all contact with Rebecca and focused on rebuilding the trust she had shattered. She was patient with me, understanding that my anger and pain wouldn't dissipate overnight. Despite everything, I could see that she genuinely wanted to repair our marriage. One evening, after a particularly intense counseling session, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words and lingering pain. Finally, Jessica broke the silence. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I know I've hurt you more than I can ever express. And I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our marriage." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. The anger and betrayal were still there, but beneath it all, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move past this. "I want to try," I said finally, my voice filled with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I'm willing to try, for us, for the life we've built together." Tears filled her eyes and she reached out to take my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving us a chance." As we sat there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that the road to healing would be long and difficult. But for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had a long way to go, but we were taking the first steps towards rebuilding our marriage. The journey would be painful, filled with moments of doubt and anger, but as long as we were willing to fight for our love, there was hope. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move past the betrayal and build a stronger, more resilient relationship. Jessica and I continued with our counseling sessions, trying to rebuild the shattered pieces of our marriage. It was a slow and painful process, but little by little, we began to make progress. Our therapist helped us uncover the underlying issues that had led to the infidelity, and we worked hard to address them. One of the hardest parts was learning to communicate openly and honestly with each other again. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it required patience and vulnerability. There were days when the anger and pain felt insurmountable, but there were also moments of connection and understanding that gave me hope. Jessica was determined to show me that she was committed to our relationship. She made an effort to be more present, both physically and emotionally. She started coming home earlier, and we spent more time together, trying to reconnect. We took long walks, talked about our dreams and fears, and slowly began to rediscover the bond that had brought us together in the first place. Despite our progress, there were still moments when the pain of her betrayal felt overwhelming. One evening, as we were having dinner, I found myself staring at her, wondering how we had ended up here. The woman I had loved and trusted had shattered my heart, and I struggled to reconcile the person she was now with the one who had betrayed me. "Jessica," I said, breaking the silence, "do you ever think about her? About Rebecca?" She looked up, her eyes filled with sadness. "No," she said softly, "I don't. I ended things with her because I realized that what we had wasn't real. It was a mistake, and I regret it every day. My focus is on us, on rebuilding our marriage." Her words were sincere, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. "Do you think you'll ever feel the same way about me again?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand. "I love you, Michael," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I know I've hurt you, and I know it will take time for you to trust me again. But I'm committed to making things right. I believe in us, and I believe we can find our way back to each other." Her words gave me a glimmer of hope, but the road ahead still felt daunting. I knew that healing would take time and that there would be setbacks along the way. But I also knew that I loved Jessica and I was willing to fight for our marriage. As the weeks turned into months, we continued to make progress. We celebrated small victories, like a successful counseling session or a particularly meaningful conversation. We also faced setbacks, moments when the pain and anger threatened to overwhelm us. But through it all, we remained committed to each other and to the process of healing. One day, as we were cleaning out the attic, I came across a box of old photographs. I sat down and started flipping through them, memories flooding back. There were pictures from our college days, our wedding, and various vacations we had taken over the years. Each photo told a story of a life filled with love and happiness, a stark contrast to the pain we were now facing. Jessica sat down next to me, looking at the photos over my shoulder. "We've been through so much together," she said softly. "We've built a beautiful life." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "We have," I agreed, "and I want to believe we can get back to that." "We can," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I know we can. It won't be easy, but I believe in us." Her words gave me hope, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of optimism about our future. We had a long way to go, but I believed that with time, patience, and a lot of hard work, we could find our way back to each other. As the months went by, we continued to rebuild our relationship. We learned to communicate more effectively, to be more present for each other, and to appreciate the small moments of joy and connection. There were still moments of doubt and pain, but they became less frequent as we grew stronger together. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica turned to me and said, "Michael, I know I've said this before, but I want you to know how truly sorry I am. I've hurt you in ways I can never fully make up for, but I'm committed to spending the rest of my life trying." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I know," I said softly, "and I appreciate that. It's been a long road, but I'm starting to believe that we can get through this." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "We can," she said, "and we will." As we sat there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace. The road to healing had been long and painful, but we had made it through the darkest days. We were still standing, still fighting for our love, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about our future. Jessica and I continued to work on our relationship, building a new foundation of trust and understanding. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt and pain, but we faced them together, committed to the journey of healing. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, Jessica turned to me and said, "I've been thinking about something." "What is it?" I asked, curious. "I've been thinking about how much we've grown, how far we've come," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I know we've been through hell, but I also know that we've come out stronger. I think it's time we start thinking about our future, about what we want to build together." Her words filled me with a sense of hope. "I agree," I said, smiling. "We've been through a lot, but we've also learned a lot. I think we're ready to start building a new future." As we sat down to dinner, we talked about our dreams and aspirations, about the life we wanted to create together. It was a conversation filled with hope and optimism, a stark contrast to the pain and betrayal that had once consumed us. In the months that followed, we continued to build our new future, one step at a time. We took up new hobbies, planned trips, and spent time with friends and family. We created new traditions and found joy in the simple moments of life. There were still challenges, moments when the pain of the past threatened to overshadow our progress. But we faced them together, with honesty, patience, and a deep commitment to each other. Our love had been tested in the most brutal way, but it had also been strengthened, and we were determined to build a future that honored the journey we had been on. One day, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, Jessica turned to me and said, "Michael, I love you. I'm so grateful for your forgiveness, for your patience, and for your love. I know we've been through hell, but I believe we've come out stronger." I looked at her, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. "I love you too, Jessica," I said softly, "and I'm grateful for you. We've been through a lot, but we've made it through together, and I believe our future is bright." As we sat there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope and optimism about the future. The road to healing had been long and painful, but we had made it through, stronger and more resilient than ever. Our love had been tested, but it had also been renewed, and I believed that together we could face whatever the future held. Despite our best efforts to rebuild our marriage, it became clear that the damage done was too deep to fully repair. The trust that had been shattered by Jessica's betrayal never fully healed, and we found ourselves drifting further apart. It was a painful realization, but one that we both had to face. One evening, as we sat together in silence, I finally spoke the words that had been weighing on my heart. "Jessica, I think it's time for us to go our separate ways." She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. "Michael, I understand," she said softly. "I don't want to hurt you anymore. If this is what you need, then I'll respect that." We made the difficult decision to end our marriage. It was not an easy choice, but it was the right one for both of us. We agreed to part amicably to support each other as we moved forward with our lives. There were no angry words, no bitter arguments, just a mutual understanding that our journey together had come to an end. The process of divorce was painful, but it was also a necessary step towards healing. We divided our assets, sold our house, and began the process of disentangling our lives. It was a surreal experience, saying goodbye to the life we had built together, but it was also a chance for a new beginning. For the first time in years, I found myself alone. The quiet of my new apartment was both comforting and unsettling. I no longer had Jessica's presence to fill the space, and the silence felt heavy. But it was also an opportunity for reflection and growth. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the structure and creativity of my architectural projects. I reconnected with friends, rediscovered hobbies, and began to build a life that was entirely my own. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, I began to feel more like myself. One of the most significant steps in my healing journey was learning to forgive, not just Jessica, but myself as well. I had carried a lot of guilt and anger, blaming myself for not seeing the signs, for not being enough. But through therapy and self-reflection, I began to understand that the betrayal was not my fault. It was a painful lesson, but one that ultimately led to a deeper sense of self-awareness and acceptance. In time, I began to find joy in the simple moments of life. I took up painting, something I had always admired in Jessica but never tried myself. I found it therapeutic, a way to express my emotions and process my thoughts. I also started hiking again, reconnecting with nature and finding peace in the beauty of the world around me. My friends and family were a constant source of support, offering their love and encouragement as I navigated this new chapter of my life. They reminded me of my strength, of my resilience, and helped me see the possibilities that lay ahead. As the months turned into a year, I found myself in a much better place. The pain of the past had not disappeared, but it had become a part of my story, a chapter that had shaped me but did not define me. I was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with hope and optimism. One day, as I was walking through the park, I ran into an old friend from college. Her name was Emily, and we had shared many adventures and late-night study sessions during our time at school. We hadn't seen each other in years, but our connection was immediate and genuine. We decided to catch up over coffee, and as we talked, I felt a sense of comfort and familiarity. Emily had gone through her own struggles and triumphs, and our conversation was filled with laughter and mutual understanding. It was a reminder that life goes on, that new connections and possibilities are always within reach. As we parted ways, Emily gave me a warm hug and said, "Michael, it's so good to see you happy again. You deserve all the best in life." Her words stayed with me, a reminder of the journey I had been on and the strength I had found within myself. I was ready to embrace the future, to open my heart to new experiences and possibilities. In the months that followed, Emily and I grew closer. Our friendship blossomed into something deeper, a connection that felt natural and right. We took things slowly, both of us mindful of the past and the lessons we had learned. But with each passing day, my heart healed a little more, and I began to see the beauty of a new beginning. Life without Jessica was not what I had envisioned, but it was a life filled with growth, self-discovery, and new opportunities. I had learned to embrace change, to find strength in vulnerability, and to trust in the journey ahead. The road to healing had been long and painful, but it had also led me to a place of peace and hope. As I stood on the porch of my new home, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a sense of contentment. The past was a part of me, but it did not define me. I was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with an open heart and a resilient spirit. And in that moment, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The end.
Subscribe to the channel and thank you for watching.